Today is Tuesday, the 25th of May, 2021. And the last time we spoke about why black football managers do not excel to become coaches or managers. And if you reflect on that video, you will see that there's a lot of comments from people from far and wide. However, today we were planned to speak about the book club because a lot of people has asked me about various different books, and I was thinking that it would be best to have a book club where they could call in or email in and we could get those books, or they could go to the publishers and get those books. There's a gentleman that I interviewed, Mr. Milton Godfrey, and I know I'm giving him some props here and also I'm giving him some sales, but he's worth it. I bought a book from him because he has just written this book, The Danger Lies in Fear, and he's got, I think, 2 other books out. One poetry book, and I think the other is a novel. And we worked together and we were speaking about various different books, which drew me to speak about the book club. Because I think a lot of people these days, because of social media, they do not find time to read. And I think it's such a waste. Because it doesn't matter how much social media you have, you do not get the concentration, the retention, and the education as you do from reading books. Books will always be something that is very special on the shelf. And I don't think that a video or a telephone or a laptop or an iPhone can replace books. So this is the reason why we want to talk about the book club. And you can get the information from the website and the email, and you can leave your comments and your request. I want to speak about my friend's book, Mr. Milton Godfrey, first, because I was reading it and I was enthralled. I was gripped by this gentleman's book. But he told me before I even started that I am going to be gripped. And yes, I am. So I'd like to read you a few pages from his new novel, which I recommend that you can get also on Instagram. And it's called The Danger Lies in Fear. And the majority of the setting is set in Jamaica, where we both come from, and he's telling the story from a young age what happened. And the character, first of all, that he's talking about is someone named Michael. So this is Mr. Milton Godfrey's novel, chapter 1. Michael Wright fastened his seatbelt, closed his eyes, and held his breath as the plane taxied along the runway at Palisades Airport. It was his first experience of a plane flight, a sensational filling in with emotions of fear, excitement, and anticipation. Those feelings were to remain with him throughout the flight and long after. As the plane became airborne, he looked through the small window next to his seat. He could see jagged rock edges along the coast, fringing the blue sea below. The plane gradually gained height and headed into the distance. He tried to adjust his mind to his surroundings while listening to the steady drone of the engines. The experience could have been a reflection of some fantasy or memory of a distant dream. There was a moment's thought about what could possibly happen in the hours ahead during flight, or in the unknown future that awaited him. A cloud rushed by, then others in quick succession. The silver lining of other clouds stretched far into the distance. Behind him was the glow of the setting sun. It was a situation far removed from any previous experience he had ever had. Not so long ago, he had been in the airport lounge, feeling the humidity and watching heat rise from the asphalt. He had been among crowds, hustling and bustling as they prepared for departure, while others were welcoming arrivals. Now he was high above them all, heading into the life of uncertainty on his way to England, with no real clarity about the future. Any expectations he had could have been shaped by misguided expressions from the stories told to him by those he had left behind. He had heard many such stories about what life was like abroad. Unfortunately, the people who told these stories had never traveled outside Jamaica. Most had never left their own communities or even the village where they were born. For a few, their only contact with the outside world was contained in letters from family members abroad or gleaned from listening to the radio. They had no real understanding of what the bigger world was all about. Michael treated all the stories he had heard about life abroad with skepticism. And although he didn't trust his own imagination completely, he was optimistic. His first 11 years were spent in Jonestown and Trenchtown, volatile environments. For one reason or another, those communities lived on a knife edge of violence. Fear were always close at hand. From an early age, he had learned that this was part of everyday living. Self-preservation meant learning quickly and growing up fast. Even before he had reached the age of 8, he had witnessed many quarrels, fights, knives, and gun attacks. He could remember at least 2 occasions when his own mother had to defend him against vicious attacks to preserve both their lives. Even at that young age, he couldn't understand why people treated each other with such ferocity. Trenchtown School was one of the many Michael attended. Mr. Byfield, the headmaster, and the school he ran both had a reputation for delivering good education. But it was a tough environment. Arguments, intimidation, bullying, and fights among pupils, and sometimes parents in the schoolyard were frequent. Later, on reflection, he had come to realize that social and economic problems, poverty, and lack of opportunity for people to escape from their predicament were all contributory factors to the tensions and conflicts. It was survival of the fittest. One of the first things he learned when he started school was how to survive by avoidance. Without brothers and sisters to defend him in such tough environment, his mother taught him his first lessons. I think we will pause there and let you, when you buy Mr. Milton's book, then you can see why his novel is so gripping and his story is told by someone who you can feel the characters in the book. And for sure, this will be definitely a winning novel. The next book we would like to introduce you to is a book by James Rohn, The 5 Major Pieces of Life Puzzles. And I've been reading this book and I've read it. I cannot tell you how many times I've read this book because I want to get my life right. And in order to get your life right, you've got to get your lifestyle right. You cannot afford not to use time or to maximize time to its full potential. Because, as James Rowan said, the sum total of failure or the sum total of success is the amount of time you spent each day working on yourself. So I'd like to read you a few chapters from the 5 major pieces of life puzzles. And that's the book there. The 5 major pieces to life puzzles by Jim Rohn. Philosophy. Philosophy is the chief cornerstone in the foundation of the 5 major pieces to life puzzle. A major factor in determining how our lives turn out is the way we choose to think. Everything that goes on in the inside the human mind in the form of thoughts, ideas, and information forms our personal philosophy. Our philosophy then influences our habits and behavior. And this is really where it all begins. Our personal philosophy comes from what we know and from the process of how we came to know all that we currently know. Throughout our lives, we receive input from a multitude of sources. What we know comes from schools, friends, associates, media influences, home, the streets. It comes from books and the process of reading. The sources of knowledge and information that have contributed to the formation of our current philosophy are virtually unlimited. As adults, all of the new information that comes our way is examined through the filter of our personal philosophy. Those concepts that seem to agree with the conclusions we have already reached are added to our storehouse of knowledge and serve to reinforce our current thinking. Those ideas that seem to contradict our beliefs are usually quickly rejected. We are constantly in the process of checking our pre-existing beliefs for accuracy or confirmation in the light of new information. As we blend the new with the old, the result is either the strengthening of our past beliefs or the broadening of our current philosophy in light of new and valuable information about life and people. The same beliefs that form our personal philosophy also determine our value systems. Our beliefs led us to make certain decisions about what is valuable to us as human beings. As the day goes by, we choose to do whatever we think is valuable. If someone decides to start his day at 5 o'clock each morning in order to take advantage of opportunities that will enable him to provide his family with more of the good things in life, then what is that person really doing? He is doing what his philosophy has taught him is valuable. Conversely, someone who chooses to sleep until noon is also doing what he considers to be valuable. But the result from the two different philosophies, from the judgments people make about what is valuable, will be drastically different. We all have our ideas about the things that affect our lives based on the information we have gathered over the years. Each of us has a personal view about government, education, the economy, our employer, and a host of other issues. What we think about these issues adds to our emerging philosophy and causes us to reach certain conclusions about life and how it operates. These conclusions then lead us to make specific value judgments which determine how we will act on any given day and in any given circumstances. We have all made and will continue to make decisions based upon what we think is valuable. Whether these decisions we are making will lead us towards inevitable success or unavoidable failure depends on the information we have gathered over the years to form our personal philosophy. In the process of living, the winds of circumstances blow on us in all unending flow that touches each of our lives. We have all experienced the blowing winds of disappointment, despair, and heartbreak. Why then would each of us, in our own individual ship of life, all beginning at the same point, with the same intended destination in mind, arrive at such different places at the end of the journey? Have we not all sailed upon the same sea? Have we not all been blown by the same winds of circumstances and buffeted by the same turbulent storms of discontent? What guides us is different destinations in life is determined by the way we have chosen to set our sail. The way that each of us thinks makes the major difference in where each of us arrives. The major difference is not circumstances. The major difference is the set of the sail. The same circumstances happen to us all. We all have disappointments and challenges. We all have reversals and those moments when, in spite of our best plans and efforts, things just seem to fall apart. Challenging circumstances are not events reserved for the poor, the uneducated, or the destitute. The rich and the poor have children who get into trouble. The rich and the poor have marital problems, lead to financial ruin and personal despair. In the final analysis, it is not what happens that determines the quality of our lives. It is what we choose to do when we have struggled to set the sail and then discover, after all of our efforts, that the wind has changed directions. And that is James Rowan's 5 major pieces of life puzzle. I think it's a read that everyone who wants to set his life in order should at least read a few chapters of that book. And as we say, you can send us your comment, send us an email if you're requesting that book, or also you can go to the publisher and get that book. This is Destiny Global TV. Please subscribe and leave your comment below.